Hi, everyone. It's Michelle Bazinet here, independent consultant and executive regional vice president with Arbonne, and I'm really excited to share with you a quick training on how to use stories to sell and sponsor. So I would love to know, those of you who are listening to this, said yes to Arbonne, said yes to building a business because of hearing about ingredients. Maybe you said yes because you heard the compensation plan. And who said yes because they heard a story about a product or a business that moved them? Something that gave you this feeling in your belly that made you think, maybe I can experience the same thing. Maybe I can do this. She overcame obstacles that I'm dealing with, so why can't I? I want what she has. How often have you been at an Arbonne event, heard a story by a speaker on the stage that brought tears to your eyes, and this gave you a sense of hope? Were they talking about ingredients or the compensation plan? Or what about the products and business have done for them? So I wanted to just share with you how facts tell, but stories sell. So what's stopping our stories? The story is usually what closes the deal. So why don't we start there? Because people feel more safe and impressive. They feel more official talking facts. Facts make us sound important, sound knowledgeable, and sound legit. So I want to share a few examples for you about stories and how stories can transition people from being a prospect to being a consultant or customer for you. So these are examples from the book, Stories That Sell by Kindra Hall. It's actually from a course that she sells called Your Story, Your Way to Success in Direct Selling. So one woman in front of the Shark Tanks wanted them to invest in her baby moccasin company. The pitch started as most pitches did: sales to date, cost of production, etc. She was actually doing a pretty good job, and it was clear she knew the business of her business, which was certainly a plus. But still, none of the sharks were jumping out of their fins to invest. Then things got wild. Perhaps sensing the shark's lukewarm response to her infant footwear, the woman suddenly shifted gears. She started telling the story of the summer she spent pounding glass out of aluminum window frames. At the end of the summer, sweaty and exhausted, she took the frames down to the scrapyard, and with the $200 they paid her, she bought one piece of fabric and started her moccasin company. As if she had poured blood in the water, the camera panned to the sharks, who were all smiling toothy grins. Suddenly, they weren't just looking at the features of her tiny shoes. No one really cared about the baby moccasins. Now they were looking at a woman who would do anything to make her company work. She wasn't just a businesswoman, she was an inspiration. And who doesn't want to invest in an inspiration? Once they invested in her story, they were invested in her. Here's another story from the course that Kindra Hall completed, again called Story Your Way to Success in Direct Selling. Somewhere in the middle of the evening, after the clothing options but before the lotions, Charisse told us a story I'll never forget. I had been working at a job I just didn't love, she said. I knew I was meant to do something great. I just wasn't sure what it was. Then I found this company. I remember getting one of my first checks. I was standing at the front door when I opened it and I just screamed. I couldn't believe it. My husband came running to see what was wrong, and when I showed him the check, he screamed too. We both stood there in the doorway screaming. Eventually, the screams turned into our little own happy dance. With that check, I knew I'd finally found a career I loved. As far as I could tell, this career she spoke of was going to happy hours, telling some stories to a really happy audience and getting paid for it. I decided right then and there I wanted that job. That night, I offered to help Charisse carry her suitcases out to her car, and as we loaded them into the trunk, I asked her, "Do you think I could do this? Do you think I could do what you do?" She stopped and looked at me. "You know, about a year ago, I met another girl at a party who reminds me a lot of you. She told me about a little bit about that girl, about how she took a chance, jumped in, and started her business. Now that girl is making six figures and leading her own team of amazing women, and she's very happy." She smiled. That's all she needed to say. I was sold. So I wanted to share those examples with you guys because they really show you how stories can transition people into that yes. So that second story about Charisse, Charisse was actually selling fun, sexy toys for another direct selling company, and Kindra Hall was at that event. And she explains how she loved hearing how Charisse was constantly telling stories all evening and was really engaging with the guests at the event. And how Charisse just stopped and looked at Kindra and told her the story of that other girl. She reminded me a lot like you. That really made Kindra believe that she could do this too. So guys, I'm going to talk you through how to create stories, how to use stories to help you build your business. So how to create a story. So in school, we're taught that with stories, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But in this case, what I want you guys to think about is there's a normal, there's an explosion, and there's a new normal. So the normal is what happened, what was. So the normal is what was, the explosion is what happened, and the new normal is what is. So we're gonna go and start with the explosion. So the explosion, it's the climax. It's the moment when things occurred. This could be a decision, a happening, the first time you felt a result from the product, that first check you received in the mail. It could be the time you were able to pull your jeans up past your knees because you had some success with the 30 Days to Healthy Living program. It could be the time your husband noticed how good your skin looked. It could be the time your neighbor couldn't believe your physical transformation, or when you were told that you were glowing. So for me, my personal story that I remember that early on in my business, even before I started my business, was that when I was introduced to Arbonne, after my girlfriend had explained to me the business and what the business looked like, she gave me a gold bag of our RE9 products and said, hey, take this home and use them. Use them for a few days and let me know what you think. And guys, I took them hesitantly because I didn't understand product. Wasn't much of a product person. I used a no-name brand, $6 skincare, day cream. Now I can't even call it skincare on my face. And that's all I knew. So I reluctantly took the product home, put it on my bathroom counter, and it sat there for a few days. And the excuses I was telling myself was that I don't know how to use this stuff. I have a 9-month-old baby. I'm too busy to read these labels to see how to use these things. But there was this feeling that I had that she was going to reach out to me soon and she was going to ask me what I thought about the products. And I wanted to be able to give her my opinion. I wanted to let her know what I felt, and I didn't want to lie. I wanted to be honest and give her my opinion. So I started to use the product. And within a few days, something started to transform in me. And so my story, what really shifted for me was one day my husband and I were in 2 separate cars and we were in a Tim Hortons parking lot, and he pulled up beside me in the car and we rolled down our windows and we were chatting, and I said, you know, babe, I feel like I have a little extra something going on. And it was because I was using this skincare. Now guys, I don't know if my face looked any different. I have no idea. But what I know is that because I was practicing self-care, because I was using product, I was feeling better about myself. It gave me this little kick of confidence. So that was really transformational for me. So there are business stories that happen. Maybe an explosion in your business. Maybe it was that time when you were able to pay off your credit cards. Maybe you were able to save for that vacation. You were able to give a little bit more to your church, able to cut back on your hours at work. So for me, one of my big business moments, the first business story for me was when I went to my first car party. So I was a few weeks into my Arbonne business, and I'm going to be very honest, guys, I didn't think that people actually earn the Mercedes. I thought that it was something that was written in the brochure just to kind of lure us into saying yes to Arbonne. But when my girlfriend asked me to go to the car presentation, I was like, sure. And I remember being in the back seat of her car, driving to that car presentation, sitting in the back seat, pulling into the parking lot, and I felt like a little girl with my nose like up against the window, in awe that there were 3 white Mercedes in the parking lot. So that really piqued my interest. That really started to build my belief. And when I went into the presentation, saw the amazing people that were there, and heard the girl speak who earned her Benz, it really made me feel like, man, if she can do this, I can do this. She was a stay-at-home mom of 3 kids, earned her Mercedes in a year because to me, guys, I thought that the people who earned their bands came from the corporate world. They had these really important jobs. They went to university, they were well educated, and they were the only ones who earned the Mercedes. When I saw someone who was a mom, she was staying at home with her kids. I don't know what her education was, and it didn't matter. What I knew was that I could relate to her. So that was a moment for me in my business when I felt like, you know what, I'm in. If she can do this, I can do this. So when it comes to the explosion, most people make the mistake by starting their story at the explosion. They start with the explosion, but starting from this place is a fatal mistake. To get people to care, we need to know what was. So we need to go to the normal. So let's use the example of the news. The news starts with the explosion. It's the car accident, the murder, the kidnapping. And when they start this way, we're able to remain really detached. And we remain detached because we have no idea why we should care. But if we knew the story of the family in the car accident, we would feel something. And I'm sure you can agree. And I'm going to use the example, guys, of the recent death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter. His death impacted so many people. I'm not a basketball fan. I knew of Kobe Bryant. And when I heard he passed away, it hit me. And then when you hear about his daughter, who I didn't know, it really hit me even harder. And I want you to think about, how often do we think about the other people that were in that helicopter crash as well? I believe 9 people in total passed away. 98% of the time, all we hear about is Kobe and his daughter. And why? Because, and why did it emotionally hit us hearing about Kobe, but not emotionally hit us so much hearing about the other 7 people? And one of the reasons is because we feel like we knew Kobe. Kobe was in the news, right? We've seen him on the news. We've seen him play basketball. We've seen him in magazines. So we felt like we knew him. And that's why his death hit us even harder, because we knew the stories about Kobe. So when you're talking about our products or our business and started the explosion, guys, people have no idea why they should care. Stories are nothing without the normal. So what is the normal? I want you to take a step back from the explosion and think about what life was like before. What were you doing? What was on your mind? What were you struggling with? What kind of person were you? What was important to you? What were you excited about? How did you talk to yourself? What were you afraid of? Where were you? Who were you with? Paint the picture of your life and a specific situation before the change. So sharing the normal is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, we don't care about what happened by default. We care because you make us care. We get people emotionally invested. So it's the power of strategic storytelling. When you are talking to your prospect, where are they in their story? And I'm going to say that again, guys, because I think it's so important that it's worth repeating. When you talk to your prospect, where are they in their story? Are they in their new normal? No, because they haven't even started yet. If you start rattling off how great it is in the new normal, they can't even comprehend because they have no imagery to go with your words. You have to meet them where they are, normal to normal. Start with your story about where you were, because guys, that's likely where they are. And as you move them through the explosion, then back to the new normal, it's more realistic because you started at the place that they are, where it's something familiar. Just like that car presentation. I connected to the girl who earned her car because when I heard her story, I heard her normal, which connected to my normal. So here's some do's and don'ts. Do build your story up relevant to the point you're trying to make. Don't include information that doesn't support your overall goal. You want to guide your listener to the conclusion you want them to come to. You want to ask yourself, does this support the overall message I want to deliver? Do include fun little facts, things that might excite the listener, something that you have in common. But don't go overboard with this. Use 1 per normal. And guys, have fun with it. It really shows that you understand people. So let's go to the end of the story, the new normal. This is where you give them an update, an assessment, a progress report. It's the picture of what's possible for your prospect. It's who you are now as a result of the explosion. It's what you know, what you've learned, how you approach or live or look at your life differently, and how they should or could too. And here's a little trick. So what you want to do is you should add a directive in the very last line of your new normal. You want to use a detail you used in the beginning of your story as a way to encourage others to take action. So for an example, what I would say is something like this. If I want to take them to my normal as a way to encourage them to take action, is if I usually say to someone, I said no to Arbonne for a long time because the idea of selling something really scared me. Because people can relate to that. Most people say no to this business because they feel like they don't want to sell. So then when I share with them how I started my business, I share my explosion, what life looks like now, and then come back, I can say something like, I'm so glad I got over that fear of trying to sell people. And I got over that fear when I realized I didn't have to sell anything. I just had to educate people. And I know that you may have that fear as well. But I also know you're passionate about cleaner, safer ingredients, and that educating other people is really important to you too. So it kind of brings them into it. It connects them to it. So you get to tell them what to do without sounding pushy. Now, you may be afraid or nervous or to share your story, thinking that nobody wants to hear your story. You may think that you're making it all about you. But guys, I want you to turn your focus to why it is you are presenting and sharing with other people in the first place. And you're doing it to serve others. If you aren't telling your story because you're worried about what it will or won't do for you, start focusing on what your story will do for other people. Your story can be a gift to others. Think about your prospect, about what they're thinking, what makes them hopeful, what keeps them up at night, what scares them. And tell the stories they need to hear instead of worrying about you. So here are some common questions. Should I tell the same story every time? Well, if you're telling an old story to a new person, remember this, it's new to them. A good story gets good by telling it multiple times for it to get really good. So when you're telling your story, study their face, their body language, and see what resonates and what doesn't. And just a little tip, stories should be no longer than 3 minutes. So you want to heighten your story awareness by considering how stories have affected you. Take a few minutes and jot down your answers to some of these questions. What are a few of the stories that you heard when you first got started? What are some stories that moved you about our products? Stories that moved you about our company? What about the business? What about a story from a leader? What stories drew you in and got you excited? And guys, really take some time after you listen to this recording and write this down and get connected to the stories. Go back and reread Arbonne stories. Watch the Arbonne YouTube channel and see the new stories. See the stories that they have in their short little adventures in Arbonne or the new Flourish videos. And if you go and look at the new Flourish videos, they've gotten so much better at storytelling. They take you on a journey. So here's how you can build an empire. You want to have stories for your prospects. You want to have a story of when you were nervous but took the plunge anyways. You want to have a story of another team member who was skeptical but did it anyways. You want to have a story of someone who worked a traditional job before and did Arbonne as well. You want a story of someone who had what it takes and who did it. So you want to share those stories with other people. You want to have stories for your team. Have a story of the one who got away, and we all know that person. You've been hesitant, putting off, reaching out to that one person, and when you finally do, they tell you they joined another company just the week before. Have a story of your worst rejection moment. Guys, I've sat in Starbucks twice now, and the prospect hadn't showed up. Have a story of the time you or someone on your team said all the wrong things, because you know we've all been there. So one final moment and thought for you. Some of you may be sitting here thinking that you don't have a story yet. Maybe you haven't had your defining moment, maybe with the product or the business, but someone else has. So I'm going to encourage you guys, go to the events, go to the Discover Arbonnes, go to the big events, learn the stories, and share those until you have your own. Thanks for listening.